I'm sure most people on the call probably already know Akanksha, but Akanksha is a solutions architect. I'm reading over here. Akanksha is a solutions architect and senior Drupal developer with over 10 years of experience translating business and customer needs into exceptional digital experiences. She is passionate about providing personalized experiences to customers and building accessible, inclusive, and well-documented applications. She is active in the open source community and an active contributor with several modules on Drupal.org, as well as all of the things that she does for us here at DGI. And so with that, Akanksha, I'll hand it to you. Thanks very much.
Hey folks, since the introduction is already out of the way, I will get started with what I want to talk about. So this session is about preserving the long-term visibility and integrity of our digital collections. Because just being online or just digitizing your content is not the same as them being safe or easy to find. So before we dive in, let's just take a second to understand why this is a relevant topic to talk about, especially today. So today's digital landscape is changing rapidly. AI is changing every single day. Content is being taken down, misinformation is everywhere. So in this day and age, how do we ensure that we are living up to our responsibility of being the stewards of the world's digital and non-digital content? So imagine you bookmark a link today, and then you come back to a 404 page when you need it. How do we make sure that does not happen? Our digital content is inherently fragile, right? So even if we do everything right, you have to do a migration and websites change or staff leaves. And then suddenly most of your content becomes inaccessible. So this talk will help you identify risks early and build safeguards so that you can protect yourselves against them. So a study by Gartner says that 83% of data migrations fail to meet business objectives. And the same study also says that data migrations happen almost every 7 years. So it becomes very important to ensure that your data is getting migrated correctly. It is still safe and still accessible. Especially now when bots and hackers are becoming very sophisticated with AI, just having your data online is not enough. You need to have it secure and discoverable. So we've seen tons of things going wrong when we do migrations, or just in my 10 years of doing this, I've seen so many things go wrong. Usually there's almost always data loss, right? If you migrate from a system that uses a particular metadata standard to another metadata standard, or even if it's the same metadata standard, there's always some sort of data that is lost. It may just be your, schema.org markups, but that means that your site is not searchable anymore. So metadata, external links, persistent identifiers, anything that is not mapped correctly or redirected properly results in a website that you cannot search through. Again, unredirected URLs, if you do a migration, you do not redirect your URLs, or if you do not use persistent identifiers, that means that your site is basically unusable. People cannot go to the links they want to get to. Then your integrations, if your content is being aggregated through OAI and your aggregation breaks, and it doesn't even have to break, right? If you aggregate to DPLI, for example, and they expect a certain number of fields to already be there, and say your derivatives are not generated and your feed does not have thumbnails anymore, that means your aggregation is broken. Your content is no longer visible to those aggregators and people cannot search through them. It's very easy to overlook some of these. And these are not just technical glitches, They're access issues that impact the future of your collections. So digital preservation, who is responsible for it? And the answer isn't straight or simple. It is not just the libraries or institutions that store this data who are responsible for this. It is all of us. It is not just a one-time thing that we do and forget about. It's an ongoing process. You need to keep iterating, building things. It's culture. It's commitment to keeping things safe. So everyone's responsible. Everyone has a role to play. If your vendors and your developers do not understand the philosophy behind what you're doing or the ethos of preservation, then your project is not going to be successful. In projects, when developers and metadata specialists, curators, everyone collaborates right from the start, instead of just handing off requirements and expecting a system at the end, then success rates go way up. Preservation and then access, they cannot live in silos and they go hand in hand. So true digital sustainability is important, is necessary for us, and it requires everyone to understand what their role in the larger ecosystem is, and not just the people whose data it is. So what can we do about this? We are going to talk about some strategies on how we can preserve our data, make our data more easy to read and understand, and then we'll also talk about how to make the data discoverable. First, and I say this, if you do one thing for your repository, persistent identifiers is it. These are the forever addresses of your digital content, right? If you have just one URL through which someone can access your content and it never changes, you ensure sustainability over migration and platform changes. You could be with Islandora today, or you could be with Content DM today and move to a completely new platform tomorrow, but your URL would never change, which means that all the search engine karma that you've built up over that URL and all the people who've bookmarked that URL still reach the correct page. And today, there are multiple of persistent ID providers. You could pick whichever one you like. It differs based on the kind of content you have. Institutional repositories tend to prefer DOIs, and then digital collections prefer handles. Most of these use handle as the base technology for their technology, as the base technology, and everything is built on top of that. These identifiers should not just be the URLs that are displayed, they should also be stored in your metadata so that they are preserved across systems. And then you need to use a resolver that is reliable. I usually recommend people to get their own resolver just because you have more control over it and you would know when it goes down. But if you do not have the budget, or if you do not have the technical expertise, there are lots of free or paid resolvers out there that you could use. So when we do migrations in Islandora, we usually integrate handles directly at the node level. So when you ingest content, the handle gets generated. You also need to think about what will happen when your content gets updated. You need to keep this data updated. So the key is to think about how this identifier will survive a migration or get updated, say, via an API. A BID is meaningless if you do not resolve it, if it doesn't resolve, or if it is not consistently applied. So, and this is like a very common thing I've seen in repositories. Your URL is access URL where people see content is different from your permalink. And that's kind of an okay compromise. But if that means that the link that people are bookmarking is a URL, that is going to change. So it might be a better idea to have all external URLs to be permalinks. Then tombstoning. So today, content is being removed left, right, and center, and you do not know what used to exist or what did not exist. So tombstoning is a commitment to integrity when content must be removed for whatever reason. If we remove content, it is our responsibility to let people know that this content used to exist. Instead of frustrating 4 or 4 pages, you could show them a page which tells them that this content used to exist. It was deleted for so and so reason. Put your persistent identifier in there so that it preserves that identifier. It still redirects to a URL and tells them that this used to exist. You can include more metadata fields like the title, why it was deleted, when it was deleted, or if you have an archived copy for it, then a link to the archived copy for that thing. So it would explain why this particular thing is gone, and it would prevent black holes in the collection or the scholarly record. This builds trust. You're being transparent about what is happening. It also maintains your SEO, right? people can still come to their URL and not go to 404. So this is like leaving a trail of breadcrumbs so that people can reach where they want to go, even if that thing does not exist anymore. All right, so we talked about how to preserve your records, your metadata, and now we'll talk about the actual files. So digital preservation is not just about access, right? It's about redundancy, validation, making sure our files are safe. Earlier this year, Internet Archive was hacked, right? Their systems were down for more than 3 weeks, but they came back, everything was restored, and this was only possible because they had backups. So it's important that you preserve your files, have backups. So do fixity checks. There are services like Baggett that allow you to package your content in a predefined format. And you could save those bags somewhere completely separate from your site so that you can recreate your site if needed. You should ideally integrate all of these checks at ingest so that there is no disconnect, right? If you ingest something, it gets checked, it gets stored onto the cloud. Have workflows around this to ensure data integrity. Use lots of diverse storage, use cloud storage, use offline copies, have air-gapped copies just for redundancy so that you can restore stuff if it goes somewhere. If you only use a platform that is for discovery or just for digital collections, you could use another service to preserve your content. Like there's lots of integrations with Archivematica to export your content to Archivematica and keep a separate preservation copy of your data. And now let's quickly talk about metadata. So this is where GLAM repositories shine, right? There are so many standards, data structured, there's so many formats, and it's amazing. However, I have seen that while we do take care of having things in mods and DC, we completely forget about schema.org. So our metadata is not only speaking to humans, but also speaking to machines. And these are not just the bots or the scrapers that scrape your website. It could be aggregators. It could be things, external services that you talk to using APIs. So it's important that your metadata not only speaks to humans, but also to machines. Yes, structured data, but do not forget things like schema.org or Open Graph, because they are important for discoverability. Islandora supports a lot of this natively. But again, it is something that needs to be configured. It is something that you need to make a part of your checklist when you go through things to make sure that this has been done. There are some things that are not strictly necessary, but you could do to increase preservation. And these are like quick win things, right? Like tracking 404s and citations. Are there citations which are not leading to the correct thing? Or having preservation workflows designed for content that is not publicly accessible. Like that content is also important, and it is incorrect to assume that it is safe just because it is not publicly accessible. This wasn't, so Internet Archive is interesting. I was doing some research for Tombstone, and I was making a module for Islandora for Tombstone. And I kind of went into a rabbit hole thinking about how I would design that. And my idea was that when you tombstone it, it would automatically send it to Internet Archive and create an archive copy and put a URL in there, which is cool. So you could integrate those kinds of workflows where you archive whatever content you delete, or just archive it for preservation. Like these services are publicly available. And then export your taxonomies. I know we all talk about exporting your content, but people usually tend to overlook vocabularies, and that causes a gap in your data. This is an interesting topic to talk about. So I know we've all had issues with AI bots, scraping, and bots have paid sites go down, and that's bad for sure. But if you can't beat them, join them. It is totally possible to make AI work for you. These days, SEO always used to be about your content should be on the front page of a Google search, and because no one goes to the second page, right? And these days, no one even goes beyond that AI summary at the top. Or people don't go to Google, they will go to an AI chatbot agent to ask what they want to know. And these tools, and they are just tools, are not very reliable at this point in time. And that's because they, just like any of us, do a search of the data, determine what is reliable, and then show those results. So our job is to make sure that our repository, our content, is something, one, they can read, and two, they rate as reliable and rank higher so that they use that content to give answers to people. So it's not complicated. It's actually very easy. Go back to the basics. Use HTML. JavaScript is flashy and very pretty looking, but scrapers do not care about those, right? So it's all about HTML, structured data. If they can't read your content, it does not exist to them. And that's a great thing. Like if you don't want them to read your content, we can do things about that, like robots.txt, right? So you can tell them what content can be read and what cannot be read. Add metadata fields that LLMs can easily parse. Think plain language summaries, named entities, consistent headings. So this will future-proof your content for the AI era. Have a sitemap. I haven't seen a lot of great sitemaps on Islandora sites, to be very honest, and that's a very quick win for people. In fact, if creating a sitemap is too much of an effort, I just found this great article the other day when I was doing some research on OAIP image feeds, where you could use your OAIP image feed as a sitemap, which is kind of cool. Social previews. When you share your content on, say, LinkedIn or Blue Sky, what does it look like? There are sites that are used by millions of people, and when you share content from them, the description is test description. So don't be those people. When people share your things on LinkedIn, there should be a heading, a descriptive type, a description, an image. One, because it looks great, professional, it increases trust in your repository. Two, it gets people to your website. If you have that catchy description in there, which tells people what it is, they would click on it and come to your website. And then, of course, if you want to kind of integrate AI search, AI summaries, think about vector indexing of content as vectors so that you can add contextual search or AI-based search. But most importantly, schema.org. Do not forget about schema.org. There is a Drupal module. There are things that you can use. You do not have to reinvent the wheel. Facets. So facets are great. They help people navigate your site, your content, go through search, but also AI bots love them and they get lost within them, right? So they keep on trying to follow all of those links and read somewhere, make your site die out. So yes, it is important to open your doors and welcome people and, so that they can see what you have, but it's also important to close doors when you don't want them to be too intrusive. So make sure you're indexing only the content that you want to be indexed. More importantly, with facets, I would say just allow only some combinations of those facets to be discoverable. There's actually a pretty great Drupal module that does that. So allow only 5 facets or allow only particular pages to be indexed so that everything is not crowded by bots. You can also use no index or canonical to tell the bots that, this page is the same as another page or do not follow this page at all. Always use clean URLs. No one likes those thousands of query parameters that make no sense. Bookmarking them is a nightmare. Making sense of them is a nightmare. Again, there are Drupal modules that you can use to get clean URLs for your search pages. Clean URLs look great. They're great for SEO. They're great for just visibility. Make sure, again, I keep repeating this, schema.org markups, make sure your content is accessible and metadata fields are properly structured. Also, if you kind of don't want some AI agents to come reach your site, say you do not like ChatGPT and you only want Perplexity to index your content, you can use specific robots.txt directives that target specific agents to only allow them access. All right, so let's quickly talk about academic SEO and what you can do for institutional repositories. This differs slightly from how general search engine optimization works because you're targeting a different system. So we'll talk about Google Scholar first. If you want to integrate Google Scholar into your website, and there are modules for that, remember that make sure their content meets their indexing guidelines. And this is important. They will not index your content if it does not meet those guidelines. And they're really tiny things, like Google Scholar does not index files that are larger than 5 MB. So make sure that all of your access copies are less than 5 MB, right? When your citation PDF URL is in there, it is less than 5 MB. Larger files can be sent to Google Book Search. It will not be indexed in Scholar. If you do not have, say, they require 4 fields at a minimum, which is title, the name, the year of publication, and the PDF URL. So if you do not have these 4 tags, your content will not get indexed. Use persistent identifiers, again, so that you have the same URL everywhere. Clearly mention the licensing and the access so that the correct thing gets bookmarked. Backlinks are great. So whoever asked the authors to link back to your persistent identifiers using those links so that they get people back to your system. 1, it increases your trust, and 2, of course, it gets more people in. Okay. Now, the reason I've put this in here was I was looking at Google Scholar, and there's this very interesting thing where Google Scholar says that once it indexes your content, sometimes it would not come back to your content for the next 2 years. So it's gone, right? Like it's indexed, and then you cannot make changes to it for the next 2 years. And there's no way to contact them. They have like 1 email. Maybe you can email them. Maybe they'll get back to you. Maybe they won't. So how do we do that? We can use the content that we have or the analytics that we have to make this possible. Have most recent publications page. If you have more than 100,000 pages, say, no crawler is going to go through all of them. I mean, they would, but it will take forever. So if you have a recent publication page and it is linked out from your homepage or is in your homepage, then every time a crawler hits your website, they would reach that page and they would see the content that you've most recently updated, and that content would get re-indexed or indexed, right? So this ensures that your content is fresh. You can also show most recent activity. For example, if I'm going to a website, I go through 5 different pages, close it. If I open it again next time, and if I see this is the content that you visited last time, that's great engagement. It converts those raw analytics into actual business outcomes and things that you can do to build engagement, build community, get more people in. Also, if you have a section of your website that gets updated regularly, that also increases the trust and ranking of your pages with search engines or generative engines. So you would rank higher. Finally, documentation. Everyone loves documentation. No one likes writing documentation. And even fewer of those people actually write documentation that other people can understand and use. Do not underestimate the power of thorough, accessible documentation. I think if you do nothing else, do this also, because documentation is the most important part. Have documentation for how your fields map, what vocabularies are there, make videos of how things are done in the system, right? Put all your admin credentials in a shared world so that when people leave, you do not lose access to critical systems. Include a metadata dictionary in every single migration that you do so that the next time when you have to do it, you know exactly what happened. Your institutional memory is almost as vital as your digital files. And now let's talk about some things that you can do to actually make these changes, right? To do all of this, we'll talk about tools that you can use. All right, so small wins matter a lot. You do not need to move to a different platform to preserve your data, or you do not need to move to a different platform to be ready for search engines or AI or anything, right? You can start small, you can start today. Also, if you need to migrate, say 5 years from now, if you're ready to migrate today, that means you wouldn't have to do all the work then. So ask yourself these questions. How well is your metadata structured and preserved? These are questions that you can ask yourself throughout the course of your project and like forever. keep asking these questions because things change, right? We all know how metadata becomes corrupt and wild and how random fields get added with no context. So these are checks that you should keep doing throughout the course of your repository. PID coverage. Can you get these kinds of reports out of the system? What percentage of your content has PIDs? What content does not have PIDs? Why does it not have PIDs? Are PIDs automatically generated? Have a list of all of those PIDs. And it's not very difficult to get this kind of data. You just have to ask for it. Do you check your broken links? Like, when was the last time you checked how many links on your website are broken? Not just links that do not resolve because they do not point to your website, but even internal links within the metadata. When was the last time you checked that? SEO and index visibility. Is your content discoverable? Have you tried sharing your content on LinkedIn and seeing how it appears? Is there a heading? Is there an image? Are you ready for migration? If tomorrow you have to move to a different platform, how ready are you? What all would you have to do? Doing it all at once, just when you have to do it, is more overwhelming than being ready all along. Integration tests. How often do you check the health of your integrated systems? How often do you check that your OAI PMH feed aggregators are still aggregating your content? How often do you go to DPLA and check, it is aggregating your content? If you have integrations with an ILS or with your CRM, how often do you make sure that content is getting synced? Do you have automated tests to ensure that? Do you have reports around those things? Is your content accessible? Do you run accessibility checks on your websites? Do you fix those issues? Do you even know what those issues are, right? You can have a feedback form on your website for people to get back to you if they have suggestions. Simple steps, even like ensuring redirects are in place or like PIDs are there, they can prevent massive future losses and make sure your data is preserved, secure, findable. And AI summarizability. Go to AI, ask them to summarize your website, see if it works. And if it doesn't, then there's something wrong.
Akanksha, let me ask you a question there. Like a lot of these tips, and especially some of the things from your quick win list, they remind me a lot of getting like a tune-up, excuse me, a tune-up or a checkup on your car, right?
Yes.
Or your truck or whatever you drive. But a lot of the folks that I talk to on a daily basis, real small teams, they might be specifically trained in librarian studies and not necessarily website management. They might not have a big IT team with them if they're from a smaller school. How often would you recommend these types of checkups for their vehicle or website in this case? I mean, you know what I mean?
Whenever you can. Honestly, it is not a thing that you do one time. I would say like schedule it, like you schedule it for your vehicles. Also, not all of these, in fact, most of these do not require technical expertise. You just need to be able to know what questions to ask and where to get the answers. And once you know that this is where I can go to get the answers, you can just do it yourself. So keep doing it throughout till you move to a different platform and then do it on the new platform. But keep doing it. Otherwise, when you come to it after 5 years, you will have 4 months, 1 year of work just to do this.
Okay, excellent. Thanks.
So checking that a migration has been successful is the most important part of a migration. And not a lot of people do that, right? Like people worry about getting content out of their current systems. People worry about getting content into their future systems. But once the content is in there, how do you check that everything moved over correctly and all the correct things moved over? So treat migrations like DevOps. Test again and then test differently. Make sure it all works. Export everything, verify everything even before you start. It's so easy to fix things before moving to the new system. Once they're in there, things become more complex. Also, your migrations will be very simplified if your data is correct. Field mapping test samples. So map every field, make sure you haven't missed fields, obviously, but also make sure your sample data contains all of the types of objects that you might migrate and all of the fields that you want to migrate. So if you're migrating PDFs, if you're migrating videos, audios, have a mix of all of those types, but also have a mix of every single metadata field that you could use. So notes, dates, you have EDTF dates, you have a different field that is indexed differently. In your sample data should be a smaller representation of your entire repository so that you can catch mistakes early on and do not spend lots of time doing the migration, undoing the migration, and then running it all over again. There are so many tools out there for checking if data sets are same or different, and then doing item counts in Drupal. Before I worked on Islandora, I used to use JSON API to do this, right? You get a JSON API output, you see all of the content, you can use an external tool to verify that all of the content is same as what went in. I feel like in GLAM, OAI is vastly underutilized because you can use OAI to do this. OAI PMS feed contains your repository content, and it is going to stay the same in your present system and your future system. So you could use that feed to compare the data sets, make sure everything is the same. Checksums, PID checks, run checksums on your file. Make sure all your persistent identifiers are getting resolved. So if you move from one system to another and you are using the same resolution service, right? Make sure that the URLs are still resolving. I don't see a lot of people doing this, and it's very easy to do, right? If you're using a handle server, just write a script to get all the URLs from the handle server, do a curl request against them. If there are things that do not return a 200, you know that those links are broken. These are very quick ways to make sure that most of your content got carried over. Implement redirects for all of your old URLs. If some of your old URLs, if your URLs are the same, great, you use PIDs, then you just need to check that the PIDs are resolving, right? But if there are pages that do not get carried over, or if there are pages that got missed, you do not know where they would go, make sure that there are 301 redirects for all old URLs, either to a new URL or just to the homepage of your website. Test your OAI feed. Make sure your content is still being aggregated. Go look at what output is, or even go look at the aggregators and figure out if the aggregation is still working or broken. So I'll quickly talk about how we do this here when we do a migration from any external system to Islandora, the kind of things we do to make sure that the data gets carried over. So I feel like our success comes from transparency and over communication. Talk. Involve the customer right from the start, right? The tests and QA should start before the ingest and not after the migration. So we have this big metadata pre-cleaning phase where we would look at a metadata librarian would talk to you, figure out the mappings, how to clean up the data so that all the issues are addressed before the migration. And then there are tons of go live validations, script checks, we check the PIDs, if all the PIDs are in there or not, search is working or not. All of those things are also checked when your data is moved over. We do move handle servers. So we provide our own handle servers or could use an external one. But when we move things to our handle server, we do make sure that all of those links are resolving. We'll give you a list of the URLs that do not resolve so that you can figure out what to do with them. Another interesting thing that we do is we do not move your files, which is great because when you copy files, it increases the scope for error, right? There's another point of failure. So we leave your files as is and just reference those files within our system. That makes sure that data is not lost during copying and files do not corrupt when you copy things into a new system. One, it reduces migration time, and two, it reduces the scope for error. There is no re-ingest necessary. We could also use your existing derivatives, although we do not usually advise that because derivatives are very closely coupled with access copies. They are displayed on your website, so it's usually a good idea to regenerate derivatives, but you could use the same ones if you wanted to. Check for structured data, check on search engines, check the meta tags, make sure that the title, description, everything is in there, right? So these are some tools that you can use to check all of the things that I've been talking about. You do not need a huge budget, or you do not need a complete system overhaul in order to do any of the things that I've talked about here. So for link audit, there's something called Screaming Frog, which goes through your entire website, gives you a list of all the links and all the links that do not resolve. So even if you run that for 10 minutes on your website, you will get a bunch of broken internal and external links, which you can work on. For metadata QA, you can use OpenRefine, which is great, and I'm sure most of you know. For PID minting, there are services that provide resolution for PIDs. Again, I recommend having your own resolver just because you have more control over it, but you could use an external resolver. DataSite or EasyID provide those services. For SEO, Google Search Console is amazing. There's also schema.org validator. If you just go in and put your content, put your URL in there, you will be surprised by the results you see. So do that. To archive URLs, like I mentioned earlier, you can use Wayback Machine. There's also perma.cc, which you can use to create an archive of all your URLs or just the stuff that you delete. So here are things that you can do right away to make a difference. So run a link checker on your website. I just mentioned Screaming Frog. Run it on your website. See how many broken links you have. Start inventorying your content, right? Test your data exports. Like I mentioned, this is something you should start today and not when you think about a migration. It is surprising. I do so many of these calls with people who want to migrate into a new system. And when I ask them what format is their data in, exported in, or how is their data exported, they do not know. And that's sad because it just increases work for everyone. So ask those questions today. Find out how you would export your data. Find out if all your fields are included in that exported data. There may be fields missing. Find out if all the data that you need to move to a new system is a part of that exported data. Find out where the files live, what formats they're in. Develop a redirect strategy for your content. So if you move content, if content is no longer there, what are you going to do? Are you going to use tombstones? Are you going to use 301 redirects? Develop a strategy. Think about it. And the easiest thing that you can do right now is adding schema.markup to your landing pages. It's very easy to do. You can go validate it, add schema.org validator. Your pages will look pretty. And there are Drupal modules to do this. Just enable the module and do it, or enable the meta tag module and add meta tags to your website, which is not technical. You can get those modules enabled and do all of that configuration yourself. And finally, for future ready websites, not that if this gives me happiness, but maybe one day websites would die and it would all be in chat. So make sure your data is readable by those machines and that they can make sense of what your data is saying. And that's all I had to say. There are things that I would have loved to talk about, like metrics and analytics and how you kind of measure the impact that you're having. How do you even know that search is broken? And maybe we'll do a separate webinar for that. But feel free to send me any questions that you have. Let's talk about things that you have done and think are great at helping you. There may be things that I haven't even looked at, so let's talk about those things. But again, if you have any questions, you can shoot me an email and we can talk about it. Thank you.
We've actually, thank you very much, Akanksha. We actually have the ability to obviously have some Q&A time right now. Before we get to that, if you can go back to your last slide, if you don't mind. I really love the way that you outlined how, there are small steps that you can actually do and have a schedule for them so that it's not as daunting a procedure. I know that a lot of not only the clients that we have, but people that we've been talking to about their sites and whatnot, it's kind of an excuse me, an analysis paralysis. There's just so much to be done. How do we do it? How can we make it digestible chunks so that we can actually get this project going or started or even completed? There's so much to do, so many things that we have to tackle. How do we go about doing that, right? And so those little easy, quick wins that you have there, some of them might have been a little less quick than others, but they still need to be done. One thing though, like the visual of a screaming frog, I don't know what that scares me a little bit. I'm not sure what to think about that. But yeah, happy to address any questions from the chat or from the group at this time. And of course, Akanksha's email is up on the screen there as well. Nobody at all. Well, I mean, it was a very comprehensive discussion, of course. I think in and around migration, especially, that is one of the most daunting things for a lot of the people that I talk to on a daily basis, and you covered a lot of that as well. And knowing that there are multiple options available there to make that easier is a good thing to know about. So, of course, any questions, we are happy to answer those in the future here as well, if anybody has any outreach that they want to send to us later on. But that being said, if there are no questions, and Akanksha, if you don't have any other final thoughts, we can certainly give a little bit of time back in everybody's day.
We could do that. I can also share the list of all the modules that we can use to do all of this when we share the slides.
Yep, and that will, excuse me, you did mention we will send out those slides, of course, as well, with all the links to those quick tips and tricks and everything else there. So with that, Akanksha, thanks very much. Thanks for bringing this webinar series to a close. It was a lot of work from everybody here, and I want to thank everybody who helped produce these. We are very happy to sign off with that. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and we'll see you on the email. Thanks. Bye-bye.